I'll start by sharing my screen. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me to talk to you this evening. It's great to see so many familiar faces, although a lot of people have got their screens off, so I can't actually see you, but I can see your name, so that's lovely. And I'm sorry we're not meeting in person because we haven't done for a long time, and hopefully we will be able to soon. This evening, what I want to talk to you about, and it's not really about rewilding, Susan. I'm talking about just trying to make Wales a bit wilder, which I'm sure we'd all appreciate. So I'm going to talk to you about the Wildlife Trust's new strategy and the part the North Wales Wildlife Trust is playing in that strategy in achieving it. And the strategy aims to ensure that we do the best we can to deal with the crisis that nature faces. I'm going to start with some rather sad facts about the state of wildlife and indeed the state of people, and then go on to talk about what we'd like to see happen, the role of the trust in that, and how it might be done. And I'll use examples of the sort of things we've been doing over the past couple of years, which we believe needs scaling up with stronger partnerships. And I'll end up with talking a bit more about what you can do to help. So I think we're all becoming far more aware of the evidence of the disruption that's being caused by ecosystems not functioning properly. We know that there are problems with pollination not working properly. You know, we're having to artificially pollinate our crops. We know that soil fertility is declining badly. We're losing the nutrition in the soil. We're losing all the invertebrates that you find in the soil, should find in the soil naturally. We're struggling with flooding through all our hard defences and through the hillsides not operating properly to manage natural flood waters. And obviously we're dealing with extreme weather, and all this is terribly topical this very week. And sadly, there's some rather devastating statistics that I'm sure you're all too familiar with, and I apologise for repeating them, but it's really sort of putting things in context, showing the true decline of wildlife in the UK, which notably is the most nature depleted country in the world. So, you know, despite all our conservation organisations, despite all our wildlife lovers, we're not looking after our countryside well. The UK population of pied flycatchers has declined by 93% between 1967 and 2016. And I know how many people love pied flycatchers and work very hard to try and improve their breeding success. Cuckoos have declined by 77% between 1976 and 2017. These are really sad stories, as you know. 8% of species in Wales are threatened with extinction. Since 1970, wildlife in Wales is found in 30% fewer places. That's since 1970. It just beggars belief, really. And this is caused by a number of things: polluting our waterways, the dominance of agriculture in our countryside. 88% of Wales is farmed, leaving very little space for wildlife. And now on top of that, climate change is really starting to have an impact. And the picture is sadly as poor in the seas as it is on the land. Only half of our fisheries are fished to ensure a sustainable future. And 50% of the seabed in the UK has been physically damaged by bottom contact fishing gear in just 5 years. If we were ploughing up our countryside in the same way, there would be an outcry, but this is unseen and hard to regulate. Much of Welsh waters is marine protected areas, but it's just not working. Simply not enough protection given to these areas. So they're in poor condition for wildlife. So even though 30% of our seas are in marine protected areas, it's not doing the job. We failed for them to achieve good status by the end of December 2020, which was something we were supposed to achieve in Wales. They're not ecologically coherent, which means that they don't function together properly. Many are in unfavourable condition, and they don't take into account the needs of foraging seabirds, for instance. So, you might have a designation, but the sand eel populations in a different place just aren't protected to provide the food for seabirds. And even less is known about the status of non-commercial marine life. We work hard to try and input records to improve our knowledge of marine data, but we really just don't have a clear idea of what's happening to their populations. And the Welsh Government has to report on the condition of our environment. And in 2020, the picture was not good. This is just a sort of summary of the situation. Iconic species like the curlew are predicted to become extinct within the next 20 years. And we're in line with global predictions for wildlife, where 1 million of the 8 million species on the planet, which is around 12%, will be extinct in 20 years. So we're just not doing the things that we've pledged to do as a nation. And not only is in nature in a poor way, our connection with nature has declined over the past 50 years, and this is a global problem. But people are part of nature, and it's partly our disconnection with nature that's making it so hard for people to see the problems that are happening to their environment, and then to take action to improve things. And it's very clear that children are really suffering. They don't get out and about as much as they used to. And as they become more disconnected from their natural environment, their fear of the outdoor increases, and adults protect them from it. And they're less able to experience the natural world, the outdoors, and to take physical risks and to learn responsibility for their own actions. So fears of children falling out of trees and hurting themselves means that they are over supervised, and they're not allowed to go out and explore nature and just learn about their environment, which then detaches them even further from it. And of course, we're seeing the impacts of climate change every day, indicators that it's changing our environment. We're impacting our whole environment, our whole planet, and to prevent the global climate spiraling out of control, as we know, we need to act within the next 10 years to ensure a healthy future for our children and our grandchildren. And there's lots of impacts of climate change that we're seeing every day, indicators that it's changing, and we know this. And it's impacting on our wildlife. This is a lionfish, which unbelievably was recently caught off the coast of Dorset. Normally native to the tropical reefs of the Pacific, this could represent the first sighting of the fish in UK waters. And it's an invasive species of fish which could pose a threat to British wildlife. They eat fish, shrimp, crabs, young octopus, squid, young lobster, seahorses, etc. And they've spread to and are causing impacts on the Northern Atlantic Ocean, and there are a few records off the coast of Brazil. So they're moving around all over the globe, alongside how the currents are moving, how our seas are warming, how things are changing. And so what we thought of as a fairly static environment is now becoming a very mobile environment. And what is a native species is not necessarily going to make much sense anymore as things move. So it's climate change is impacting on our ocean conditions, and species which have evolved over millions of years are now having to adapt very quickly to the changes, and they can't keep up. Terns, for instance, rely on cold water for success for their breeding attempts. And seabirds are among the species worst affected by climate change. For instance, kittiwakes and guillemots are in decline. Rising sea temperatures have a lasting effect on the whole food chain, which will ultimately impact on the seabird populations. Zooplankton, they struggle to survive in warmer waters. So sand eels, which feed on the zooplankton, have less to eat, and their populations decline as well. And this means that seabirds will have less prey and their populations will fall in line. And another obvious impact of climate change is the earlier arrival of spring. So, when plants open and when insects are emerging, time of egg laying and migrants arriving in birds. And this trophic asynchrony between the timing of predators and their prey is causing problems for food networks and disrupting whether animals have food at the right time of year. Plants are tending to respond more quickly to the warmer temperatures than insects, which in turn have responded more quickly than birds. But it might mean that, you know, our birds arrive and a burst of growth is over, perhaps. They're doing their best, and research has shown that some birds can speed up their breeding processes, but there's a lag, and this can affect their success and survival. So sorry, that's terribly gloomy. I didn't really want to talk to you about it. And obviously it's something that, you know, occupies a lot of our minds a lot of the time, I'm sure, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And so what's the Wildlife Trust doing about all this? So we've been working together with all the other wildlife trusts in the UK, and we've come up with our strategy collectively. And so I feel like we're working very well together to try and address this right across the country. And what we're looking for is a thriving natural world with wildlife and natural habitats playing a valued role in addressing the climate and the ecological emergencies, where people are inspired and empowered to take action for nature. It's all very good words. And what's the role of the Wildlife Trust in all this? Well, we believe, as ever, we want to bring wildlife back, and we recognise a decline. We want to empower people to take action for nature, and we want to create a society where nature actually matters to people, so that decisions are made with nature in mind. So we believe that if we start to respect and work with nature rather than against it, that we recognise that people are part of nature, not separate from it, and have dominion over it, that we can start to have great wins for society. You know, if we can slow down flooding, we can protect the health and well-being of people. We can help ensure our food security, where we're reliant on healthy, locally grown food, which is grown in a sustainable manner. We hope that we can stabilise the climate, and then at the same time that we start to put nature in recovery at scale and at the speed needed to help restore biodiversity. So one of our goals, along with all the other wildlife trusts across the UK, is to see 30% of land and seas managed for nature's recovery, where we have more space for nature, where it can start to return to former areas where wildlife was once more common. And this larger map shows European protected areas in North Wales. Perhaps these could be the foundation of key hotspots where properly managed wildlife can start to come back. The smaller map shows our nature reserves. And even if you included the nature reserves of the RSPB, the Woodland Trust and Plant Life, they would still look just as insignificant. So we can do what we can on our own land, but it's just not enough. We need to be thinking much bolder and at scale. And these red lines, this rather busy looking map, is the sites of special scientific interest in North Wales. It looks like there's a good number of them. And these are supposed to be the legally protected places where wildlife is safe. But a study recently carried out by the organisation responsible for them, Natural Resources Wales, showed that of those features where we knew what was going on, which wasn't all of them, 20% are in favourable condition, about 30% are in unfavourable condition, and about 50% are not in a desired state. So even in the areas where wildlife should be thriving, it's sadly not. So going back to our nature reserves, this is a map showing the Wildlife Trust sites, and the purple dots are those sites. In no way am I downplaying the value of the significance of these nature reserves. They're absolutely critical. They're essential refuges for wildlife. And they're places where people can have wonderful encounters with wildlife, and where we can demonstrate to other land managers what can be done to encourage it. Imagine if all the conservation organisations hadn't been acquiring land over the past 50 years and managing it for wildlife. Wildlife would be in an even worse state. But if looking forwards, we can give wildlife more space to move around in less hostile environments for it, then our sites, and those of the RSPB and Plant Life, are going to be the sites where wildlife will expand from, and well-managed protected sites as well, SSSIs and what have you. So thinking about this 30% of land for nature, North Wales covers 2,375 square miles. The national park is 823 square miles, and the areas of outstanding natural beauty are about 300 square miles. SSSIs are 285 square miles. So what does 30% of land, not talking about the sea at the moment, just talking about land, what does that look like? So that's about 710 square miles, 30%. So that's the area of the national park. So if we could try and get our SSSIs managed properly, if we could get land within the national park managed for wildlife, if we could get areas within the AONB managed for wildlife, it doesn't feel like it's too outrageous a suggestion, but obviously it needs a lot of work to do that. And this is a map that some of you will be familiar with, that the Countryside Council for Wales came up with a number of years ago. And I keep going back to this map because this was looking at the habitats of Wales. It was looking at the protected sites. So the yellow areas are the protected sites. So you can see the Dee Estuary up at the top north east, and you can see parts of Snowdonia National Park and Mathtraeth there. The green areas are the areas which could be restored to both create habitats that wildlife would be able to move into, but that they're much bigger, much better connected to help create more ecologically coherent habitats for wildlife to thrive. It just feels to me that this is what we should be aiming for, and something that could be a long-term goal. So just going back now to our nature reserve, this is just one of them, and I won't have time to talk to you about our nature reserves this evening, and I'm sure you've had other talks from our staff telling you more about our sites in detail. And this is one of our more recent acquisitions, Minera Quarry, which is not far from Wrexham, and it's a great site because it's really big. It was an industrial landscape for about 400 years, a limestone quarry. And now nature's slowly reclaiming the former quarry workings and buildings. It's got a rich diversity of wildflowers and trees, bats, reptiles, lots of orchids. So as well as improving the land for wildlife, we're also working with neighbouring landowners who are also managing sites at scale to really have a focus for bringing wildlife back in the most wonderful area. We're working with the Clywedog Partnership as well to improve habitat connectivity and public enjoyment of the area. And so our nature reserves are the places where we can demonstrate what's possible for wildlife. We know that if you give wildlife space, it will come back. You know, these areas were bald quarry workings, but they're starting to look like, you know, the Yorkshire Dales with the amount of wildflowers and that's coming back. So as long as we've got seed sources and we've got refuges for wildlife and natural habitats, it can start to move back. And we want people from all backgrounds and cultures to help bring our vision with us, embracing the diversity of our society to change the natural world for the better. So get more people involved, and our nature reserves are brilliant places to do that. In case you don't know, but I'm sure many of you do, we've got a couple of guides to our nature reserves. So if you want to find out more, they're all open to the public. We've got 2 books. One is about the nature reserves themselves, and one is about walks that you can do around our reserves. And it's a great target to go and, you know, visit all our sites across North Wales. So you can find these both on our website and on our shop section of our website. So I'm suggesting that, well, nature reserves are not enough. And so for some time now, we've obviously recognised this, and we've been working on our living landscape projects. North Wales is a very big place, and so we wanted to try and focus our activities on 3 key areas where wildlife was particularly important, where there were hotspots for wildlife. And here we've been working with landowners to start to recreate the links between important wildlife sites and to help it come back. And so the badgers on the maps are our nature reserves, and then the dark green areas are the sort of fuzzy boundaries of our living landscape areas. The Allen and Queeler project is called Woodlands for Water, and so we're working closely with landowners to help restore the uplands, try and increase the tree cover through planting and natural regeneration, and help the hillsides absorb more water, improve the soils, make them better for wildlife, create better activities of water through streams and rivers and ponds and wetlands, and slow flooding down on the main rivers in that area. And in its first year, we've established 4 tree nurseries for this project, and we've been working with over 60 landowners, woodland and hedgerow planting, and lots of restoration work. Farm water plans have been produced for over 20 of the land holdings, and we've developed farm infrastructure improvements to reduce watercourse pollution. And the Anglesey Fens project, which may well be more familiar to many of you, the area certainly, centres around the internationally important wetlands on Cosgor, Costrainiog and the other smaller fens. And again, working with neighbouring landowners to support them in work that they can do for wildlife, and reducing water pollution, which has a direct impact on the condition of the wetlands. This is a photo, an aerial shot of part of the Allen and Queeler living landscape area, where we're recreating those missing links and bringing woodland back. So in the valley area, you can see sort of running straight across the screen, we're working with landowners to start to re-establish woodland in that valley area. You can see it's crying out for it to be back, and so that we're working with landowners to do that. And we're also working closely with the Welsh Government, because with Brexit, the way that agricultural subsidies are paid is changing, and they've started work in England in how that might look, but in Wales we're sort of lagging behind a bit, and we're working as wildlife trusts in Wales with the Welsh Government to try and make this new environmental support scheme the best it can be. And we feel like there's as I mentioned earlier, there's 88% of the land in Wales is farmed, and so the way that we can make a difference for wildlife is really to change how that land is farmed, and to support landowners in bringing their ability to bring wildlife back as part of their farming business. And 2 other key projects that we've been working on to improve ecosystem health and bringing wildlife back are the Welsh Beaver project and the invasives control project. So with the Welsh Beaver project, we've been working, as you probably know, valiantly for many years to try and bring beavers back to Wales in a managed way, bringing them back as their rightful in their rightful place as nature's engineers. They make changes to their habitats, which create diverse wetlands for other species to survive and thrive, and are known as keystone species because their activities can benefit a wide range of other animals and plants that live in the rivers and wetlands. So we see them as a really critical mechanism for improving the ability for other wildlife to come back. And of course, they were once widespread across Wales, but due to overhunting for their fur and meat and scent glands, they became extinct after the Middle Ages. And by the 16th century, they were extinct. So we're focusing on a managed reintroduction of beavers on the Avon Dyfi now, and we've got beavers in an enclosure on the Dyfi, and we're seeking a licence now from Natural Resources Wales for a 5-year pilot to monitor the effects of beavers in the wild in Wales. We've established a beaver management network, and this includes setting up a network of beaver volunteers who'll be on hand to deal with any problems caused by beavers, so we can all enjoy the benefits that they bring. And if you want to find out more about what's happening with the Beaver project, you can sign up to the Beaver newsletter on our website and keep up to date with what's happening there. We often need public support for the consultations that we're running to try and bring them back. So, the more people involved, the better. And then another project which is helping with sort of connectivity and the the health of our rivers particularly is the invasive species project. They've been introduced by humans either intentionally or unintentionally beyond their natural ranges. And so, as I mentioned earlier, with climate change, things are moving and changing, and some species are causing real problems for our own native wildlife. And this also affects our economy and our health and the way we live. So one of the projects we're working on, which is the Wales Resilient Ecological Network, which is a bit of a mouthful, but a project we're leading on throughout Wales, where we're establishing a framework for tackling invasive species right across Wales. And we've got an officer down in Wildlife Trusts South and West Wales, and a staff member up in North Wales too. And an area where we focused our activity particularly is on the River Dee, through the sustainable management of the Dee catchment, where we've been focusing on the control of the removal of, and the prevention of the spread of invasive non-native species. And we've been working there for quite some time now. And the Bala to Corwen section of the Dee is now pretty much clear of Himalayan balsam, for instance. And we've cleared 100 kilometres of invasive species on the Dee. So we're working in a very strategic manner, and sort of working with landowners and partners to reduce them and stop their impact on other wildlife. So to me, this is a landscape which shows how things can improve in Wales. We've got heather and scrub on the upper hills, which are absorbing rainwater instead of it rushing off quickly off tightly grazed sheep pasture. It's much more absorbent, and then it reduces the impact of flash flooding in higher rainfall. There's habitats for upland wildlife such as curlew and birds of prey. And then on the flanks of the hillsides, we've got non-intensively grazed permanent pastures, which aren't covered in pesticides and fertilizers, which is helping to ensure insect diversity, which is important for pollination and for all our wildlife species which rely on them. There's clean water in the streams and rivers, without all the impact of farm pollution, which is also reducing the cost of cleaning water for drinking. It's supporting healthy soils and sustainable farming into the future. It's retaining perhaps some remaining fragments of wildflower meadows, which are wonderful places for people to visit and to enjoy the fantastic opportunities you can have when you're out for a walk, and perhaps you come across a wildflower meadow which is buzzing with insects and birds feeding, swallows swooping. It's just a delight to behold. And this mosaic of woodlands and hedgerows is, as I say, slowing down floodwaters, and it's habitat for abundant wildlife in all seasons, for seriously declining species such as hares and cuckoos and hedgehogs. Hedgehogs are the only place hedgehogs are doing any well now is in gardens, and there's so much countryside out there for them, if only it was less hostile to them. And these woodlands, as you see, all the hedgerows are all connected, which helps with species such as dormouse, for instance, which don't cross open ground. So you've got better connected habitats for their populations to thrive. And we've got retention of natural boundaries such as clothiae and the hedgerows, which are a great host to a great variety of wildflowers such as sheepspit scabious, and it's habitat for reptiles and insects. And having a landscape like this is helping us to improve our food security. Nature is actually playing a positive role in increasing food security. We've got pollinators, and we've got soils which are healthy, which are better growing environments for our agriculture. And the natural processes are working better and more connectedly. And what we'd love to see is far more abundant wildlife. When was the last time you saw clouds of butterflies in a field, or insects covering the number plate of your car when you drove out one evening in the summer? Our common species, what we saw as common species, are in crisis. Wildlife species have declined in abundance since the 70s, but we're championing ways of bringing them back and looking for a 50% increase by 2030 on the 2020 levels. And a species that we're focusing on at the moment is the swift. We're working particularly with householders, with school groups, community groups, and surgeries and chapels and theatres and university buildings, putting up swift boxes all over North Wales. We've got lots of survey volunteers who are out there championing the needs of swifts and how we can try and alleviate their decline. So if anybody's interested in becoming a swift champion in your community, we'd love to see people right across North Wales who are, you know, looking out for places where they could be, places where they are, you know, understanding how swifts are using your own local community, and things that we can do to try and improve it. And in the marine environment, what do we want to see? Well, by 2030, we want to see at least 30% of our seas fully or highly protected. And at least 10% are within fully protected areas. So, you know, some of these areas need to be absolutely highly protected, because at the minute, as I mentioned earlier, the designations that we've got are just so lax that it's just not doing the job. And that the marine protected areas that we have should improve greater protection of deeper waters and foraging areas, as I mentioned earlier, in relation to the tern feeding areas, for instance, where good sand eel populations are. And where sites are fully protected, absolutely no destructive or extractive industries are allowed, and any impacts are minimized. And within a highly protected area, you can only do light ones. So you're zoning the seas far more clearly, and so that you can see, you can control the different industries in different areas. And obviously we've talked about climate change, and one of the things that we have to be very conscious of as an organisation is that the crisis for nature and the climate are caused by the same issues: overconsumption, unsustainable activities of human society. And as we know, as an organisation ourselves, our own activities have an impact on the climate. And so we've got our own plan to try and reduce our carbon footprint, for instance, by reducing our energy use. And we're trying to bring that our emissions down to net zero by 2030, along with many other organisations. But we don't need to just look at reducing our energy consumption. We know that restoring natural areas can actually help with the climate crisis, and at the same time improve the future for wildlife. And this is a win-win situation. This is a positive thing, that if we start to create more areas for wildlife, if we start to bring them back, restore them, we can bring back wildlife, but also help mitigate the impacts of climate change. Restoring nature, absorbing carbon. And we're calling these nature-based solutions. And we're absolutely certain they can make a significant difference to locking up carbon and reducing emissions. And so in our marine environment, there's many things we can do. We can start to restore salt marshes, seagrass beds, and excitingly, we've just started a new project on restoring seagrass beds in North Wales. And by restoring the health of the seas, we'll start to enable the seas to have a healthier phytoplankton population, which again absorbs more carbon. And on the land, you know, there's lots of habitats that will help mitigate against climate change as well. Peatlands are unbelievable absorbers of carbon. Their damage is releasing carbon. So the more peatlands we can protect and restore, then the more carbon they can soak up. And at the same time, they are wonderful habitats for wildlife, as you know. And our ancient oak woodlands are the most wonderful places to absorb carbon, and there's lots of opportunities in North Wales to start to reconnect them through natural regeneration, through planting, through hedgerow establishment. grasslands, which are rich in wildflowers but also have healthy soils, are better at absorbing carbon than poor soils. So there's lots we can do, both to mitigate climate change and also to bring wildlife back. And this is a group of people who are having a great time taking their kids out in the countryside and re-establishing woodlands as a part of a tree planting project. It's helping to reduce flooding, so it's ticking lots of boxes. So more of this sort of work right across North Wales will make a real difference. Project where we've been trying to restore carbon in peatlands is at Cattanach near Bala, one of our nature reserves. It's a nature reserve we've had for a very long time, between the A5, Codwen and Bala. We originally cleared the forestry crop because we knew that there were significant peat resources underneath that crop, and we used the funding from the tree clearance to start to restore the habitat and to actually purchase the land. And now we're reinstating the natural functioning of that system, re-wetting it and allowing peatland to redevelop and to lock up carbon again. And another one of our goals, which is quite a big one, is where we are looking to see 1 in 4 people taking action for nature's recovery before 2030. There's been some research done which suggests that if 1 in 4 people act to do anything, then they start to influence other people around them. So it's part of behavioural change science. So, for instance, if 1 in 4 people on a street could put in a very visible bird box or swift box on their house, then it starts to encourage other people to do it. If they talk about it, they become then ambassadors for a change. And so 1 in 4 people seems to be this tipping point that we should be aiming for. And it's not just people acting to change their behaviour with the North Wales Wildlife Trust. This is people across North Wales doing something for nature with whoever. They can do it themselves, they can work within their community, they can work with their businesses. So it could be anybody and working with anyone. So we see ourselves as an organisation which can help empower other people too. We feel like we have a lot of knowledge and understanding about how to bring wildlife back, and we really want to share that with many, many more people. And young people are obviously absolutely critical to the future of our planet. So helping them to have the tools to try and make changes in our society to make things better for wildlife is a key part of what we're doing. And we have our Stand for Nature project, which is running right across Wales, which is engaging young people in them, with our support, taking actions to help improve our environments. And we're working very closely with local communities. This is an example of a site in Kaya Park in Wrexham, where we're working with young people, with people to look after their local environment, increasing their understanding of it and improving their connection of the natural world. Here we've been transforming wildlife poor amenity grassland into areas rich in pollinators and wildflowers. So it's become a more enjoyable, interactive and interesting place for local people. But it's also been reducing the cost of the local authority in terms of managing those areas of land. So the picture down on the left-hand side is the area that we've restored to, or not restored, I don't know what it was beforehand, but we've created wildflower grasslands on those areas. And this is so over the past 60 years, and many people who are here tonight are those people who have gained a lot of knowledge about what can be done with wildlife, how we can help wildlife. And we want to be able to expand that knowledge through local communities in North Wales. these people here are from the Push Glass community, which is near one of our sites in Denbighshire, Coed and they see Coed as a local immunity. We've worked closely with them, looking at what they wanted to achieve within their local environment. What were the things that they wanted to do? It could be perhaps a photography club who want to go out and take photos, or it could be young, small children need a place to play, and it's just sort of understanding how those communities can be improved, but also looking at what the opportunities with nature are for those communities to improve. And in this project, the community, we wanted to improve the site for pied flycatchers, so we wanted to put up boxes. So with local people, they adopted pied flycatcher boxes. They made them, they put them up, and they've been monitoring them. And the children are so excited to see what's happening with their pied flycatcher box. And in the local shop, which is the sort of hub of the community, they have a big board up on the wall which shows what all the different boxes are doing, what the birds are doing. And it's that real connection with nature which has become more integral to the lives of local people there. Excuse me. And a key thing we obviously have to do is influence people with the power to make changes. So a lot of our work is involved in working alongside the Welsh Government. We've got advisors who work in Wildlife Trust Wales who are spending a lot of their time reviewing the policies which will influence how our society will behave in relation to wildlife. And as I mentioned, a particular focus for us at the minute, as we see it as a sort of once in a lifetime opportunities to try and influence how landowners will be supported to carry out actions to help wildlife to recover. So this is a real focus for us now. And also with the race for marine renewables, especially in North Wales, we need to do what we can to review all the proposals and their impact on wildlife. And we've been working very closely with many ministers and Welsh Government officials. Here's Mark Drakeford and Lee Waters, who's the Deputy Minister for Climate Change. We've worked with Sophie Howe closely, who's the Future Generations Commissioner, to advise them on things that they can do. We've got lots of companies who we work with. Many of these are particularly around Wrexham, where we've worked very physically with those companies. And we try and work with them to make their business more sustainable and do more for wildlife. The Wrexham Industrial Estate is one of our living landscape areas, and here we've been working very closely with businesses. Over 30 businesses and groups are partners there, and we undertake contracts for wildlife friendly grounds management, and we carry out wildlife hedge laying, pond restoration. The site is the biggest industrial estate in Europe, but it was left fallow for some time, and biodiversity started to come back. So there's a lot of wildlife there in and amongst the buildings and the industries. And so we're working closely to try and safeguard the important bits, make the places better for wildlife, make the places better for places for people to work. We're doing quite a lot on public access and improving places where people can walk at lunchtimes and just get a bit of fresh air and perhaps see some wildlife while they're out. And volunteering is one of the best ways that people can help us. For a change to be made, everyone, or 1 in 4 people, in fact, would be enough, can play their part. And so there are lots of things that you can do, your friends and family can do. We've got over 500 volunteers working with us now, and they're the power behind the Wildlife Trust. They carry out over 20,000 hours a year, which is unbelievable, and we just simply would not be the Wildlife Trust without them. These are volunteers who are helping us with our Allen and Wheeler project, and many of you will know we've got an inspiring programme of activities through the year and right across North Wales, and they're tailored to make the best of any skills that you might have. And you just need to go to our website, and we've just put up a new programme of volunteer activities, and there's lots of things to get involved in. And our volunteers don't only carry out practical work. Our trustees are absolutely critical to the work of the trust. We've got a really super committed group of people who are guiding the work of the trust, making sure that we stay legal and solvent. And we, as part of our team, we also have a wonderful marine advisory group who support our work in reviewing our the impact of marine developments. As I mentioned, there are, so many marine renewable proposals throughout North Wales, and in order for them to have a positive impact on our environment, we just absolutely need to make sure that they're in the right place and that they're not, while producing renewable energy for us, destroying nature at the same time, which completely defeats the object. And these marine experts who are supporting the Wildlife Trust have been absolutely fantastic in trawling through piles and piles of dense documents detailing all the impacts that these developments might have on wildlife. And it's they who review our the proposals, and with our staff, they decide on the stance that the Wildlife Trust needs to take and submit comments and objections if necessary to the planning authorities. But it's an area of work that we really don't have enough capacity, so it's something that we need to really step up on, and our volunteers have been absolutely brilliant in sort of helping us on our way. So aside from volunteering, there's lots of things you can do at home, and I'm sure many of you are doing them already, but again, go to our website. We've got lots of fact sheets and spotter guides and all sorts of things where you can learn more about wildlife, but also find out things that you can do yourself in your garden to help. And thankfully, our outdoor events are really starting to ramp up again now, and we've got a wonderful range of activities going on over the summer. I just saw the events programme a couple of days ago, and it just looks really exciting. So please do join us, come out and visit one of our sites, or go out with one of our wonderful leaders who can show you more about the wildlife of North Wales. And if you're not signed up already, go to our website. You can sign up for Wild Weekly, which will just keep you in touch with all the things that the Wildlife Trust is doing and ways that you can get involved and can help. And our campaigns have been, we don't run many campaigns. We really have to try and pick our battles, so we haven't got enough capacity to perhaps do everything we want to. But the campaign against the red root really seems to have been making a difference. So this is the A55, A458 link road, which would tear through the landscape of Flintshire, it's fair to say. And if we don't manage to stop it, this 13-kilometre dual carriageway will damage and destroy wildlife habitats in its path, such as ancient woodland, wildlife meadows, hedgerows, and great crested newt ponds. And the traffic generated will also pose a serious risk to wildlife such as bats, barn owls, badgers, and otters. So with high profile support from Yola Williams, our online campaigns in 2020 and 2021 were really effective at getting our message across to the Welsh Government, elected representatives and election candidates. And we're really grateful to everybody who took part in those campaigns. And we're confident that the campaign contributed significantly to the Welsh Government announcing in June 2021 a freeze of all new road building projects in Wales. And that's who we were specifically talking to, Lee Waters, about, the Deputy Climate Change Minister. So this freeze has been put on this project, and a subsequent independent review is being carried out in light of the climate emergency and changing commuting patterns. More people are working from home, so it's all been put on hold. So we supported his decision to hold this review, and we sent a letter to him supported by 19 other environmental organisations in Wales. And we're confident, as I say, that the petitions that people signed, that many of you may well have signed, have actually really influenced that decision. So we need to hold out on this campaign. We'll keep people updated on what's going on with it. And we understand that the recommendations of that review will be coming out in June or July this summer. So we'll be updating people then. So finally, in order for us to do our work, we could not do it without our members. So if you're not a member of the Wildlife Trust, can I really encourage you to be? We simply wouldn't be who we are without our members. We wouldn't exist. So it's not very expensive. It's a cost of a cup of coffee every month. And you'll get that warm fuzzy feeling knowing that you're contributing to trying to help us do what we think you want us to do in safeguarding wildlife and trying to bring it back. And that's me. If you've got any questions, I'd be very willing to answer them.